verse 28. And it begins, when he arrived at the other side of the regions of Gadarenes, two possessed men coming from the tombs met him. They were so violent that no one could pass that way. What do you want with us, Son of God? They shouted. Have you come here to torture us before the appointed time? Some distance from them, a large herd of pigs was feeding. The demons begged Jesus, if you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs. He said to them, go. So they came out and went into the pigs, and the whole herd rushed down the steep bank into the lake and died in the water. Those tending to the pigs ran off, went into the town and reported all this, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the whole town went to meet Jesus. And when they saw him, they pleaded with him to leave their region. And my topic is, do you really know him? See, when Jesus arrived at the regions of Gadarenes, he arrived to a place that had slopes, a land that wasn't even fit for living, but they were still making a production. They were still making money. This was the land of the Gentiles. That's why there were so many pigs there. The slopes were so treacherous that the historian said that the pigs would run downward and that they would tumble off the region into the Sea of Galilee. So not only was the land bad territory, the people were being terrorized by two demon-possessed men, creating a hostile environment. So the people were able to make a small living, but their potentials was being restricted or limited. How many of us know what it feels like to be in a restricted and limited circumstances? That no matter how hard you try, it seems like something is holding you back. But when the demons saw Jesus, they knew three important facts that believers sometimes, for some reason, we feel it hard to rest in our soul who he is. They knew these three things, and these are my 3 points. The first thing that they knew about him was he was the Son of God. In verse 29. So I'm asking you, do you know that he's the Son of God? That at first it was the Word, and the Word became flesh. And that the Lord left his throne in heaven and wrapped himself in flesh, filled the belly of a virgin, walked the winding road with the cross on his back, being persecuted, yet he never sinned with all the weight of sin on his back. That he was present before the beginning of time. Do you know this Jesus that I'm talking about? That he's the King of kings and Lord of lords, the great I am. Then the second thing that they knew, that he had authority. Verse 29 says, have you come to torture me before the appointed time? They knew that he wasn't subject to time, that he's able to redeem the times, that he can go back in your life and give you what the devil stole from you, that he has authority over everything, that he has authority to forgive sin and over sickness, over death, over bondages, over limited circumstances, that he has been given permission by the Father to do what he please. He don't need man's approval. Then the third thing he knew, the demons knew, that he had power. See, in verse 31, they begged him, well, if you drive us out, send us into the herd of pigs. And he spoke one word and said, go. That's all he did. He replied with just go. So he has the power to execute the authority, power over the heavens and the earth, over all principalities, all powers, over every addiction, over every depression, every suicidal thoughts, generational curses, mental disorders, that all he has to do is just speak a word and your whole circumstances change. That all he has to do is just speak and your whole being change. All he has to do is just say one word and everything falls to their knees. See, he has the authority to do whatever he wants to and the power to execute them. See, there's a difference between believing and knowing. See, we've been in church all of our lives, and we've been warming up these pews, and we said we've been walking with the Lord all of our lives. But God is saying that there is a difference between believing about Jesus and knowing who he is. See, to believe is to have a firm conviction, to hold an opinion. But to know is to perceive directly, to have a clear understanding, to have an experience, to have a personal relationship. See, the thing is, you can play make-believe, but you can't pretend to know. You can't pretend to know who he is. See, faith guides us into knowing who he is. Believing requires an emotional leap into the unknown. But knowing means that your intellect has decided that everything about him is true. There's no room for doubt. There's no room for compromise. It's that knowing feeling that rests down deep in your soul that you know if he did it back in 85, he's going to do it in 2014. See, we know all these things, but yet we tolerate the enemy in our camp. We've been playing pity pat with the enemy. Invite them into our homes where our kids reside. We don't want to get the jokers out because we need a bill paid. But God said, you're going to have to know in this season who I am. See, in this region, these people tolerated him for a long time. Mark and Luke talks about this. And it was an infection in the land. See, this infection is that secret you've been holding that you don't want to give up. The anger and the bitterness, the unforgiveness, the molestations, the rape, the children out of wedlock. This is the infection that has rested on the land, that you failed to give it up. But then they saw Jesus. But these people saw him, and they sent him away. Because they was willing to deal with the demons. They was willing to live in normalcy. They was willing to live on the world terms. They didn't want to be set apart. They was willing to compromise. The world go to Club Ice, we go to Club Ice. The world go to the strip club just because it's a bachelorette party and a bachelor's party. You don't need to be there because it's compromise. But they was willing to send the Lord on his way and to tolerate the enemy in their cap. And it wasn't because they didn't believe who he was. They had an encounter with him. They watched him deliver these people out of bondage in front of them. And they still said, you're not welcome here. See, I know that they didn't know because the person who had authority over all things stood in front of them. And he had the power to speak whatever need that they have. See, John 2:11 said when he was at the wedding, there was a need for wine. He turned water into wine. John 6:1 said he used 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread to feed 5,000 plus women and children. So they didn't know that he can handle every situation and every problem. And before we start being so critical and start placing judgment and being, oh, I can't believe those gatherings, that's us. That's who we have become. That is us. And you say, I'm a minister, I'm a prophet, I'm an evangelist, I sing in the choir, I'm on the usher board, I work the music. But God is saying, listen, there is evidence when you know who I am. There is evidence. Matthew 16:13 says, when Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, who do the people say the Son of Man is? They replied, some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, still others says Jeremiah, and one of the prophets. See, this is when we just believing about God. They was unsure. But Jesus said, what about you? He said, who do you say that I am? Simon Peter answered, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, son of Jonah, for it was revealed to you but only by flesh and blood, by my Father in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build a church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it, and I will give you the keys. Do you know what it is to have keys? I give you access to whatever anything is in the kingdom of the heavens. Access. That whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loose in heaven. Simon Peter knew who Jesus was. But in verse 17, their relationship changed. I thought about Pastor this morning when he talked about a casual friendship. He went from being a casual friend or a casual disciple to intimate relationship with God. Because at first, he was being called Simon Peter. And all of a sudden, God started just calling him Peter. What is the first thing we do when we get to know somebody? They get a nickname. We start using their middle names. When you start getting close to them, what's the first thing you do? Somebody's name change when you get married. That's let you know that you're in a relationship. But Jesus is saying, you know who I am. I have given you authority to bind and to loose, to take your homes back, to take your kids back, your kids' kids, to set things in order. You've been praying and saying, Lord, I'm waiting on you to answer some prayers, but God's saying, I'm ready for you to activate your power. Activate your power. Do you remember on the cartoons, Wonder Woman used to activate? I'm just waiting on you to activate what I've already given you. Quit trying to wait for a response when I've already answered your prayers. See, there's a difference. I don't know about you. But it's just something when you know that you know this unshakable faith that can't nobody talk you in and can't nobody talk you out of it. This faith that when the doctors tell you that you got 6 months to live, you said the devil is a lie. When you off in the dope house and you barely made it out, but he snatched you out, and then when they come and tell you something different about your kids, you say, no, because he brought me out the crack house. He could bring my kids out. It's just something about when you know that you know that you know that you know. See, there's a lot of believers being held up because we have accepted a life of limitation because we don't know who he is. See, we see him do it for others, and we think that he can't do it for us. That's why we become haters. We always in a competition trying to figure out who the best in the kingdom. We all the best in the kingdom. We all the best in the kingdom. We all the apple of his eye. Because we failed the norm. He's not a respectable person. If you knew him, you would become humble. And you would know that if he can use a goat for his glory, it's just an honor that he chose us. We have been really willing to tolerate the devil's just devices, all the terrorists of attack. Don't you know you worried about Syria and it's over here in your house? The Al-Qaeda has set up camp in your house. That is suicidal bombing at your house. That he's trying to take your kids out while you're watching Housewives of Atlanta, Love and Hip Hop. He's trying to take your kids away from you. Prostituting your kids' future because you don't want to be in order with the Lord. See, and God told me to tell somebody, if you have a hard time knowing who he is, go back to your encounter. Nobody opened up the doors of the prison but him. Nobody else made the death angel pass on by but him. Nobody kept the gun from going off but him. Nobody pulled you out of addiction but him. But these people rejected the encounter. And I came to tell somebody that 9 years ago, on February the 14th, I buried my son. And as I lay prostrate at Cook's Children's Hospital in the chapel, all these years I had believed I grew up in church. But when I had my encounter with him and I had to bury my son and they took him off life support, I knew that there was a God, a mind regulator. So when I had a stroke in 2010 at the age of 30, I lost my son at 25. When I had the stroke at 2010, The devil was in the hospital say, you ain't going to never be able to work this left side of you. You ain't going to ever be able to talk right. But I went back to my encounter back in 2005, and I said, if he regulated my mind back then, you can't take me out right now. If he did it then, he ain't going to be able to take me out now. Go back to your encounter. You done missed it. In 2014, God has served notice on the land. And he told me to tell somebody that he has released the power of deliverance on the people who know him. That somebody's kids is coming back. Somebody's generational curses is being broken. It's not a coincidence that pastor is preaching about curses in relationships. He says, I'm breaking finances, debts are being canceled, wombs are being opened. You better start declaring in this season that it is the Lord on your side, that you know who he is. The gatherings, the region of gatherings, in Greek it meant reward at the end. And I just want to close it by saying, you don't want to miss your reward when you already know him.